Hi everybody, it's Paul Wolf, the boss man, back again with another lesson on leadership today. Um, Before I get into the subject, today's subject, I want to remind you to subscribe to me on YouTube, um, and also visit my website. And here's the address for that: www.theboss.rocks. So let's get into it. Today we're going to talk about leadership. And by the way, I'll say this again, and I've said it before, is I know the board's a little hard to read as they go along, but once I get these videos posted up on the website, I also have the outlines for all these printed, typed up nicely so you can read them, and you'll be able to print them off and everything too. So anyway, today, leadership, management style, system management, and being results oriented. Um, First, we're going to get into management styles. The first style I want to discuss is what's called in sports a player's coach. Um, and that a player's coach is the one that's on the side of the players and always relates well to the players and is on their side per se. And this isn't being a really good leader. In order to be a good leader, and again, remember there's a difference between a leader and a manager. We're all relating all this to running a restaurant. So leaders in the restaurant business are supposed to be called managers, but that doesn't make them necessarily a leader, and that's what in part what I'll be discussing today. But a leader has to be more concerned than just about the players or the employees to be successful. You can't be just solely focused on being a player's coach and making everything good for the employees, because that doesn't necessarily bring profit to the bottom line. And as a leader, that's what you're hired to do. Or as a manager, that's what you're hired to do, and a leader does do that. So just making your employees happy all the time isn't going to accomplish your goal. As much as we'd like to just say, oh, we just love our employees and we do everything for them and then they do everything for us, it isn't realistic. It's not. Not all employees are good. And so if it was just that easy, there'd be a lot of people being millionaires. We'd all overpay our employees and we would get over profited. But that's not reality. So next is about management style: standards, presence, and psychological and emotional atmosphere. And I want to get into this a little bit. One of the reasons you are a manager or a leader is because your standards. You have to have higher standards than everybody else. You have to expect more. You can't be the leader is supposed to be the best. If you only expect to get a B, your employee expects to get an A, he's going to outperform you. So you're not being a leader. And it's not just expectations of yourself and standards for yourself, but for the restaurant, for each individual employee. So you got to have high standards. If you're aiming for anything less than the very highest and aiming for perfection in order to attain excellence, like we talked about in my last video, you're selling yourself short, okay? And you're not optimizing things as a leader, okay? Next is presence. And this is something I've just come up with. You probably won't ever find this in any management or leadership book or anything. This just comes from my experience. Over my 30 years in restaurants, when I walk into a restaurant, especially as the manager, the owner, or a leader, or whatever, suddenly everybody knows I'm there. Now, sometimes it's a good thing. It's like, oh shit, Paul's here, or shit, get your ass together, or the asshole's here, or whatever. That's not necessarily a bad thing either. It's not necessarily a good thing that they're calling me an asshole, but then again, it comes with the territory. It's part of the job. If you're holding people accountable and making sure they do their job, and they don't necessarily want to do that job or that particular task, if they don't like wearing their name tag or wearing their uniform or their hat, or they want to shortcut this part of the procedure or something, and because you've all of a sudden arrived and now they're doing it, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Granted, we'd like them to do it because they're supposed to do it, but um, uh, at least it's getting done now. And what you have to ask yourself, okay, well, if it's not getting done when I'm not here, who is in charge while I'm here? And we need to make sure they're checking on this employee and holding them accountable, making sure they wear their name tag, or that employee wears their hat when they're there, or they're not shortcutting a procedure when that manager manages, and that's an issue. Um, so presence, there's something to be said for presence. And when the boss walks in, uh, people almost always notice, and the word travels really fast. And I'm sure sometimes before you even get out of your car, they see you pull up sometimes, depending on what kind of restaurant you work at. So, next is psychological and emotional atmosphere. Um, Now, I bring psychology into this, and I don't want to sound like I'm playing with people's minds or this or that or whatever, but um, you have to understand each employee's makeup, and it takes time to do that. Now, the longer you work with them, the more you'll get to understand them. Ooh, excuse me. Um, and as you get to understand each employee and what motivates them and demotivates them and whatnot, you'll understand how to manage them better, which is actually psychology. Not that I'm like I said, not like I'm trying to play mind games or head games with anybody. That's not at all the case. And anyone who knows me knows I'm not that way. I'm very straightforward, very upfront. So they know that that's not the case. But there is a element of psychology to it. Sometimes you'll be baffled by an employee and you'll go home and say, what do I have to do? What do I have to say? How do I have to say it in order to get this employee to do what I want them to do? Or just to become motivated and everything. I was actually at McDonald's 2 mornings ago and saw the most unmotivated counter person I've seen in a long time. She dragged her feet. Everything she did, it was like she was on purpose trying to do it as slow as she could. And I noticed that another employee that was really busy and seemed to be a really good employee asked her to go back to the walk-in cooler and get some mocha mix or something. And some mocha something, which was probably for my mocha frappe. But she waited about 5 seconds for this girl to get to. She waited about 30 seconds for this girl to finish what she was doing. She was getting some jelly for another customer. Another customer had come up to the counter. It had already been served. Come up to the counter and ask for like 4 packets of grape jelly and 4 packets of strawberry jelly. And this girl took as long as she possibly could to get that jelly. By that time, the other employee got irritated. She says, never mind, I'll get it myself. And the other girl was obviously seemed to be pretty busy. She had been working hard the entire time I had been there and watching her. And but, you ask yourself as a manager, what does it take? What is it going to take? How not only what am I going to do, but how am I going to do it to get this employee motivated? And sometimes there's no answer. Sometimes you just have to let them go. So not everybody is capable or willing. Most all are capable, but not all are willing. So that's where the psychology comes into it a little bit. Emotional atmosphere. Okay. I was a very strong disciplinarian when I was a younger manager. I didn't have tolerance for or patience for these type of people. And this type of employee I was just describing, as a matter of fact. And I was really hard on him. And that. But the thing was, and my anger would come out, um, and I would be loud. I would yell and scream, but it really never solved any problems. I can't think of an employee off the top of my head that uh, all of a sudden got whipped into shape permanently because I did this. Maybe for the short time that because they knew they made me mad, uh, but embarrassing them and yelling at them. And it's not that I was trying to embarrass them. It was just I saw a problem needed to be addressed immediately, and I addressed it regardless of whoever was around. And I did it usually loudly and angrily, and that rarely works. And it's better to pull that employee off to the side, retrain them. Kind of assume that they don't know and retrain them. Maybe almost as if you're stupid. Um, and then try to get them to do it the right way or faster or whatever you're wanting them to do. And then if they can't do it, you do it a second time, a third time. The third time, it's like, look, we've had this discussion a few times. Either you're going to correct this problem or I'm going to have to take some action. And maybe that action is cutting your hours. Maybe the fourth time I'm going to write you up or whatever. But try to make it as unemotional as possible. And because you don't want to seem sadistic, like you're taking pride in someone's failure. But at the same time, you want to be helpful. And if you've given them a couple or three chances, you've done that. And it's not so much what you're saying to this employee either. It's how the other employees perceive you. They know that they're not coming to work in an atmosphere whereas, geez, if I screw up, Paul's going to yell at me, or scream at me. He's going to get mad, That's no one wants to work in that atmosphere. I don't, and I don't think any of you do. So how is it a motivation? It isn't. So this is, you have to learn to control your emotions, and when you learn to control your emotions, you'll find that your restaurant will respond better to your delegation. So next is the disciplinarian, which is kind of what I just discussed. And this is kind of the opposite of the player's coach. They're the hard ass. And they usually take standards to a whole nother level. And you have to be human too, and understand that people aren't going to be perfect, and they are going to make mistakes. Even the best employees, they're going to goof up sometimes, and so discipline isn't always isn't. I mean, although there's a place for discipline, being that way all the time is a real downer. It's makes for a very poor atmosphere where people don't want to come to work and stuff. So you have to mix in positive reinforcement and thank yous and warm fuzzies and stuff as we go, as well. And it's really as I in my old age I sit back and I look at this in hindsight, and I realized as a younger manager I got too emotional, and I talked too many times without thinking first. But as an older manager, it's really simple. We all pretty much know right from wrong, and who's doing good and who's doing bad. And sometimes the problem is us. Is we don't want to discipline that employee, so we let it go 3 or 4 times, knowing that they're doing this incorrectly, and we let it go. And then when we say something, we explode instead of doing it. If we would just do the right thing the first time, and go up there and approach them calmly, and then do it again the second time, we would save ourselves a lot of headache. A lot of management is confrontation. So if you can't deal with confrontation, you probably shouldn't be a manager or a leader, and you're not going to be an effective leader because you have to be able to confront people. That's your job. That managing, leading, it's all about people. So if you can't do that, and don't think you can be a manager or a leader of any sort and not deal with people and have confrontations, it's going to happen. It's one of the main parts of your job. Now that confrontation can be positive. It can be a negative that you make positive. It can be a negative that you make negative. It's what you make it. And avoiding those confrontations usually is a downfall. It's almost always going to set you up for failure. The next type of manager is what I call the desk jockey. Not to be confused with a disc jockey. A desk jockey, one that just sits at the desk and all they want to do is paperwork and everything, but be out in the operation. Part of being a restaurant manager is being in the operation. It's going out to the tables, talking to your customers. It's interacting with your employees. It's working side by side with them. It's going to wherever in the restaurant that you are needed the most. If the kitchen is slammed, you go to the kitchen. If it's seating people, then you seat people. And when everything's going good, you're out with your customers talking to them. So you can't do any of that stuff being in the office. Okay? The next is the user. Sometimes, especially with younger managers, they get, especially the first or second time they become a manager, they want to use their power to get what they want, to get their free meals, to leave early, to not have to do physical work or whatever. That's not a leader. That's a manager. It's not a leader. You may be a manager, but you're not a leader. Okay? The next is the yes man. This guy will do whatever the boss says, whatever the company says, this and this and this. And nobody's right, even companies. I don't care how big they are. In fact, sometimes the bigger they are, the more wrong they are. So you have to, as a leader, leaders think for themselves. And they have common sense in everything. And if they see the company is doing something wrong, or whatever, or the boss is doing something wrong, there's a tactful way within every organization to give that feedback back and following those procedures to do so. But think for yourself. If you're going to be a leader, you got to think for yourself. You can't just say yes, yes, yes. Okay? The last is the true leader. Okay? Now, what is a true leader? Again, leaders aren't managers. Leaders can't be appointed. You can't be hired. You can't be promoted to it. Leaders are chosen. Okay? Chosen by the followers. Okay? People follow and choose leaders, not bosses, not companies, whatever. People will follow somebody. Okay? Leaders are social. This is hugely important. Don't forget this. If you want to be a leader and you're antisocial, you're shy or whatever, you're probably not going to be a good leader. Because leading is about people. Okay? Managing is about people. Okay? It's social. It doesn't mean that you have to be the most popular. It doesn't have to mean that you're the head of the clique or the leader of the pack or whatever. Those things make it easier. But if you want to be a good leader, you have to be social. You have to interact with people. And that's what it all boils down to, because as a leader, you can't do everything yourself. And you can't guarantee it's all going to get done. So you have to have people that are willing to follow you and willing to do what you need done. Okay? And it's the only way to get anything large accomplished. Because you can't build a house by yourself. Yeah, well, maybe you can. It'd take you 2 years or 3 or 4 or 5. But if you want it done quickly, and for restaurant management, this is what we're talking about, you've got to have people follow you. So it is social. You have to be able to have those relationships. Okay? Excuse me. Um, Sometimes that can become a popularity contest. Sometimes the leaders are chosen by popularity. Um, Hopefully, that popularity is because this employee or manager or whatever sets a good example, is a true leader. Um, but that's not always the case. It could be a popularity contest, and this can be good or bad. Um, like I said, they could be a true leader, but then again, they could just be there for social purposes. That could be the reason that they're the leader. Okay. Um, Again, people mean social. People choosing a leader makes them popular also. So just because you're popular doesn't mean that's necessarily a bad thing either. Because if they choose you as a leader, and there's no vote that goes on, it's just people will follow. Okay. Um, Certain, all the cooks will follow this one cook, and um, or all the waitresses will follow this particular waitress or whatever. It's not a voted on it or anything else. There's respect there, and that's been earned, and in that respect, they follow them. So, but by them choosing a leader, that makes them popular. Okay, like it or not. Although they didn't become the leader because they're popular, but being the leader made them popular. Understand? There's a difference in sequence. Okay. Next, most people are followers, um, and it's just the way it is. And why is that? Well, it's safer to be. I forgot my F in there. It's safer to be a follower than it is leader. Um, they're less apt to get in trouble. The trouble they get into isn't going to be as bad. Um, you know, for example, when a sports team isn't winning, they fire the coach. They don't fire all the players. They fire the coach. Now the new coach a lot of times comes in and cleans house. But it's just the way it is. It's safer to hide in the numbers and inside the herd than it is to be standing out front of it. It requires more, no doubt about it. It's harder to be a leader than just to be an employee. It's harder to be a manager than it is an employee. It's stressful. It's more time consuming, and so on and so forth. It's riskier. Again, it kind of goes back to say it's kind of the opposite of safer. It's risky. It's you're putting your neck on the line for others. If someone else screws up and they're under your supervision, it's your fault too, in part. So it's riskier. In the absence of leadership, they will follow somebody's. It may not be because there may not be a true leader around. So they'll follow this person on some things and this person on other things. If you're not the leader, and if you're the manager and you're not the leader, they're going to follow maybe the head cook on certain things and the head waitress on other things, and or just tenured employees or the person that got them hired or whatever. They're going to follow somebody because most people are followers. True leaders are concerned with results and balance. And that's the bottom line is results. It's all about results. It's got to be profit. It's got to be a good working atmosphere. It's got to be a safe one. It's got to be a healthy one. And when I say healthy, I mean sanitary wise and mentally and emotionally healthy. And you've got to be doing something for the customer. You got to be offering them a good product or a good service or a good balance of product and service or value. Okay. Otherwise, it doesn't work. That's the balance. Okay. Now, in business, the balance is in thirds. 1/3 for the business owner, 1/3 for the customer, and 1/3 for the staff. If you don't have a balance, it's approximately 1/3 of each of all those, you're not going to succeed. You're just not. You may succeed for a little while, but it won't last. Okay? If, for example, if your prices are too high, okay, yeah, you may initially make a lot of money. You may open up and have all this grand opening advertising and everything, and people are coming in and everything, and you make a ton of money because you got really high profit margins. But in the meantime, your employees are working twice as hard because you're so busy. Okay, um, from this advertising, they're not happy. The customer's not going to return because they're getting ripped off. Okay, if you if you're a player's coach too much and you coddle your employees too much, the customers, they don't have a sense of urgency taking care of the customer. They're not making the best product they can make. They're not making the stuff the right way. You know, then the customer suffers. Okay, eventually all this is going to get back to the owner. If I've worked for companies before where they manage themselves out of business. They are so worried about food costs and labor costs and everything, and they're large corporations are trying to drive that number lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. They're so concerned with those numbers that the fact that the restaurants are dirty, the fact that their service is terrible, the fact that their product is now being skipped on because they're cheating the customer on food, not giving them the correct portions because they're trying that so hard to hit a food cost, it's unrealistic. Okay, now POS systems has helped us out a lot in that way, but they give us a theoretical food cost that's hopefully programmed correctly, and we've got some realistic numbers. But back in the day, they used to just kind of pull these numbers out of the air. And then, the guys that were really hungry, they'd say, okay, we're going to take that number and we're going to take another 1% off it. And next thing you know, you're just cheating your customer. And you're not going to win in that situation either. And that company, I'll tell you what, the market I worked in, they closed up every single restaurant in that market, and they had 20 or 30 restaurants. And now, even now, which is, over 20 years later, they've still not reopened those stores. They're growing back in this market again, yes, but nowhere near the number of stores or the volume of the stores we're doing. They control themselves out of business. Okay, so you got to have that balance. And as a manager and as a leader, that's what you're concerned with, and producing that realistic profit for them. And when you've got that balance, your sales should go up too. Is just off making your customer happy and giving them a fair deal, your sales should go up. Okay, so even it may not be much. It may be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%. But as long as those are going up and you're making a steady profit, it's just going to get bigger and better. But you got to keep that in balance. You got to keep your employees happy. You got to keep your customers happy, and then you've got to keep the owner happy by giving them their profit. Okay, and that's what you're hired to do as a leader, as a restaurant manager. That's what you're hired to do. The owner will tell you you're hired to make money, but you as a leader know you only do that through taking care of your people too. Okay, a true leader truly cares about all three of those: customers, the owner, and the staff. Okay, they care about all three as people. They have a legit concern for the owner. They're the ones that hired them. They're the ones that they're doing this work for. You work for the owner. So, but you care about them as a person. You care about your customers as a person. You want to give them good food. You're never going to let anything that might get them sick or that's unhealthy slip out the door and go to them because you care. You don't want them to get sick. You truly care about them. You care about your employees and the work atmosphere they work in and the emotional atmosphere they work in. Um, and when you care and it shows to your customer, to your owner, and to your employees, you're going to be successful. Responsibility. You have to accept the responsibility for all these things. You're the leader. You're the one in charge. You have to, and you say, well, I'm only an assistant manager. Well, then you're responsible for all three of those while you're there on your shift, when you're managing your shift. Then, the general manager might be responsible for you as well, but when he's not there and you're there, then you're the one in charge. You're the one that's responsible for that. It accomplishes, a true leader accomplishes these goals through character, which we discussed last time, in passion, character. They do it by holding employees accountable. If they make a mistake, they hold them accountable and say, this is the way we do it. This is the correct way. Da da da. Okay. They do it through systems. You have to have systems because otherwise, every manager, you have 3 managers, and every manager would have their different way of doing it. And it needs to be the same way so employees can be the same employee they are, whether you're here, Joe's here, or Sally's here. They have to have systems, okay? Next is through training. And this is where so many restaurants fail, is there's so poor training systems out there. The very first operation I ran, I broke everything up into positions, covered the information I needed to cover with them, made a quiz up, and made a test out. And I would literally take the quiz out and ask them the questions 3 or 4 times so they had them basically memorized. And did the same thing with the test. Now, why did I do that? Because I wanted them to know the information. It wasn't about seeing if I could lecture them and if they absorbed what I talked about. It was I wanted to pound the information into their head. I wanted them to know the information. I want them to get a 100. If they don't get a 100, then that's because I didn't teach them good. Okay? So, and if they're not doing the job physically fast enough, they're mentally, passing these tests and they're not physically able to do the job, then they need coaching, which is my next point. Is, just because you read a book on how to swim doesn't mean you're Mark Spitz now. You've got to get out in that pool and you've got to practice and everything. So and while they're practicing, that's coaching. You coach them up. Coaching is like on the job training. Okay, it's the physical part of aiding that employee in the learning process to getting their physical standards up to an acceptable level. Okay, so you coach them along. You give them practice. And if they still have some gaps, maybe you've got a gap in your training. Maybe you're giving them all the answers, but you're not telling them why. It's important. Everybody wants to know why. Is the first thing you learn how to ask when you're a kid. Don't you ever cross the street. Don't leave the yard after dark. Why, Mom? Why? Why, Dad? Why? Why? Everybody wants to know why. If you're not telling them the whys, then you're just hurting yourself. Okay? So give them all the information. Make sure if you're going to develop a training program that it's thorough. And never be afraid to go back and update it and add more to it. Okay? And then give them the information because you want them to know it. This isn't high school or college where I'm going to sit up here and lecture you and then I'm going to quiz you or test you on Friday or at the end of the class and to make sure you absorbed it all and you're paying attention. I need you to know this information. So if I have to cover it with you 3 or 4 times, reading it to you or you reading it or whatever, then do it because you need to know this information. and I need you to know it. Okay? They're also going to do this with good judgment and good decision making. Um, a manager has to have good judgment and has to make good decisions. It's just part of being a leader. You know, part of what I look at it's the 2-minute drill. You get 2 minutes left of the game. We're down by 5 points. We've got to score a touchdown to win this game. You've got to be able to suck it up, get in that huddle, get the other 10 guys to follow you, get them on the same page as you. We're going to do this as a team, and we're going to succeed. And you've got to make good decisions. And in doing so, you've got to make good judgments. But this is what you're hired for, is making decisions and judgments. They trust you as a person in your personable qualities, your character, to make these correct decisions. And we all make mistakes, and it'll happen. But when you make those, you got to move on. Sometimes you got to take your beating. If you're a good leader, you're probably gonna beat yourself up more than what your boss will beat you up for it anyway. If he even beats you up, it may be something small enough. Your boss never knows. The district manager can't be at every store all the time. So, but that's what you're paid for. That's crunch time. Using good judgment, making good decisions. And lastly, is product and service. We've got to have something sellable. We got to have a sellable product. We've got to have good service to make people want it. If you're selling dog shit and ice cream cones, it doesn't matter how good you do it. You've got to have good product and you've got to have good service. So it's the only way it's going to happen. That's it for this lesson. I'll try to do another one again tomorrow on leadership. I believe that one, the next one coming up is going to be, we got the same one printed off here. So I don't know what the next one. It's going to be on leadership. I know that. I've got a few more on leadership coming up. So look for another one in another day or two. Again, please leave me comments on the website, on the YouTube channel or whatever. Subscribe to me again. Again, here's my website, www.daboss.rocks. And we'll see you soon. God bless.